Hi everyone, it's Louise Pearson back with another video in the series of When You're the One with a Life-Limiting Illness. And this one is about confronting the worst case scenario. So I guess before we begin, I just want to say to those who might be watching these videos for the first time that my experience is as a lived experience with pancreatic cancer. So I have lived experience of a life-limiting illness, and also I have experience as a mental health social worker and a grief and bereavement counsellor. And in looking at this topic, I did just want to say that these are just my thoughts. These are some of the things that have helped me and people that I've worked with. So I'm not saying this is an exhaustive presentation on this subject, but just some of my thoughts. And I want to talk about the worst case scenario because I feel like the subtitle of this video should be, Can Be Helpful. The worst case scenario is often the elephant in the room. It's the thing that we flash forward to and we have panic about, and it's something that sometimes we are discouraged from thinking about and from talking about. If the worst case scenario is that you're going to die or that you're going to get a lot worse in terms of your illness or in terms of its presentation, people will say, don't talk about it, don't think about it. And of course, what do we do when someone's saying to us, don't think about it, is it doesn't work. It doesn't work for us to switch it off by someone just telling us not to think about it. So I think it's something that we need to give some thought to, and that sometimes doing that can actually free us up a little bit. And I guess the main point also to make here is that each person's worst case scenario may be different. So I could, of course, be talking about death here. That's probably the worst case scenario. But for some people, you might be a person with MS confronting the possibility of a wheelchair or the inability to do self-care because you're getting older. Or it might be the death of a loved one that you're fearing. It might be when you finish work. Big change is scary for all of us, and so often we're looking at worst case scenarios. And I think it's an issue for us because it's an issue of control. Worst case scenario in terms of life-limiting illnesses often means that we're talking of something where we're fearing powerlessness. And powerless, we might feel powerless to help ourselves. So how are we going to cope when we can't do our self-care? How are we going to cope when we get sicker? We may not be able to live at home. The possibilities are endless. But it's also powerless to help those we love the most. Most of us have responsibilities in our lives that we don't want to walk away from willingly, and we might fear for other people and people depending on us how they're going to cope. Now, I've talked about this in previous videos, how to deal with the flash forwards that we have, the flashing forward to the worst case scenario. And it can help to ground yourself in the present and to think about it in terms of this is something I'm preparing for. Most people listening to this video will be thinking of it rather as a future rather than as something that is happening right now. So go back to some of those strategies for managing the flash forwards. But sometimes facing the fear can give us back some of the control that we think is missing. So I think that part of this is considering what can you do while you're as well as you are now. And, that might be, can you make plans to make the house that you're living in more accessible? Have you explored the service options that you have or that you might have and that might be able to help you? In Australia, the NDIS has made a major change for people, and there is choice and control, and it might not be something that you've ever wanted to have choice and control over, but it might give you more options for equipment, for care hours, those sorts of things. So in some ways, can my aged care and palliative care. A palliative care nurse that I know talks about how, people think of palliative care as being just before death, but in reality, having palliative care early can extend life. So those things are important to find out about. Go through your paperwork. Get rid of the things that only you can decide on. And I think it's a positive thing to do anyway, whether I'm going to need to or whether I'm not. I'm going to feel better if my matters are in order. You might need to consider making plans regarding your employment. How long will you work for? Are there decisions that you need to be making about things like your company? For me, for example, as a counsellor in private practice, I need to think about my clients. Is there considerations regarding your superannuation? Often when people are in their last year or doctors are prepared to say that, then they can access the superannuation. And these things are going to be better if you've thought about them. Ensure that you have enduring powers of attorney. They are medical and financial, and you might need to put someone into these positions for you so that your needs can be or your wishes can be supported as things change for you. And of course, the big elephant is death. If it is the death scenario that you're considering, then you need to think about whether you have a legal will. And that was one of the first things that I thought of as I was having surgery last year. Have you thought about what sort of funeral you want to have? What's the service that you'd like to have? Who do you want to speak? Who do you want to or are there particular Bible readings? Are there particular things that you do or don't want to happen there? But it's not just a matter of funerals and finality in that respect. It's, are your financial affairs in order? Do people know where to find things that only you would know? Your passwords. One of the things that I've done, for example, is to make a spreadsheet so that when the executors of my will need to look at it, they are there and they will know where to find things. And again, this, might not be something that will be a problem for me for some years, but it's a good thing to do anyway, and it gives me some peace of mind. I think one of the things that I said earlier was that often these things are hard to talk about with family and friends. People will often want us, for example, as people who have cancer, to be hopeful, to stay with that hope, to be thinking that everything's going to be okay. So I think this seek help that I have at the end of my slide here should be on every slide really, because there is help out there, and if you're feeling these thoughts about a worst case scenario for you, as I've said, it doesn't help for someone to tell you not to think about them. So it might be that you can find one person in your friendship groups who you can talk to. It might be that you seek help from a funeral planning service, and all of the funeral directors do that sort of thing. It might be that you see a solicitor and get your will and powers of attorney in order, or that you seek out a counsellor so that you can talk about the things that are most worrying you and look for some ways around them. Because if things are planned, if you've done the most that you can do to set things in order, then I think it makes sense that your mind will be more at ease. It's a difficult topic, I know. I hope you found this helpful. Keep watching for more of these videos. If you found it helpful, subscribe.